Hello everyone, and welcome to the first part of a two-part presentation on validity and reliability. We will be talking about reliability first, and one of the things that is a big idea of this course is the phrase underneath the title, to be valid, a test must be reliable. One of the reasons that I include this in every assessment course includes the three parts of the test creation triangle: validity, reliability, and absence of bias, because you need to know how to talk about a test intelligently. Many of my students, especially in the discussion board that we are doing now, Hard as the Dickens, where we talk about how difficult it is to create one of these large-scale tests, they start railing about how unreliable and invalid these tests are for poor kids, for kids from the city, without really knowing what those terms mean. So, if you're going to argue about the validity or reliability of these tests, you need to know something about it. So, we're going to talk about reliability first, and some essential questions that I have, or that you should be able to answer when we're done, is what makes a test reliable and why does it have to be? Second, why do I need to be concerned with the different types of reliability? And third, how can I use reliability and validity in my own classroom? If you read If and when you read Popham's chapter 3, he always has a section in his chapters about why I need to know about this. So at the end of the chapter on reliability, he makes a statement that you shouldn't really be concerned about reliability, but as I go through this presentation, I will tell you some things about reliability that you do need to be concerned about. Of course, I have a little cartoon here, and as you'll see, it says, "Don't move, or I'll fill you full of 98% lead, 1% antimony, 0.75% silver, 200 parts per millimeter of nickel, with trace amounts of cobalt and other components below their respective detection limits." And I say, wait a minute, are those values, and I cross out certified, reliable, and valid? I know. It's stupid humor. Okay, again, you see my vocabulary in your own words alert. This means there are going to be vocabulary words that you need to be filling out as we go along, and there are going to be some in this presentation. There will be 2 vocabulary quizzes on these words. I believe one in the next session and one in the last session. And you will hand in your vocabulary in your own words that you type, save, and upload in the last session, I believe. It's the last session or the next to last session, but it's at the end of the course. So that's what you should be doing with your vocabulary in your own words. So the definition of reliability is the stability or consistency of an assessment. It's that simple. If you're getting the same results every time you issue that test, then it's reliable. So when we test a student, we must be sure that the results won't vary significantly over the course of several administrations. Now, you can't do this in your classroom. You can't give a test, but you can look at a test and see if it's functioning the way you expect it to do. Are the smartest kids in the class, the kids that usually do well, are they getting the questions right that they should be getting? That's how the big test takers do it. If a student is consistently getting most of the questions right, then that's a consistency. This is the standards for educational and psychological testing definition: consistency of a test measurement when the testing procedure is repeated on a population of individuals or a group. And that brings us to the first type of reliability that we're going to talk about. One of the things that assessment textbooks like to do is they like to use targets to show you what consistency is, because that's what it means. It means, are we consistently hitting the target? So if you look at a target number 3, you can see that those results, or those darts or bullet holes or test results, are in a fine group, which means they're consistent. So whoever was shooting at that target was consistent, but they were consistently off, which means in target shooting, that means that you're either not correcting for the wind, or your sights need to be readjusted because you're shooting accurately, but you're off target. So those are consistent. The target number 4, now those are what we call consistent and right on target, which would be reliable and valid. Now, the thing about test scores being unreliable is that they can't tell us anything. If we're getting results, if we can't be sure that we're getting consistent results, then we can't make any kind of inferences about those tests. We would just be guessing. This one number 2, I don't think that's possible, because as you see when we get into the validity, if you create a valid test, it's going to be reliable. So anyway, we'll move on here and talk about the types of reliabilities. And that definition that I gave you a couple places ago, that consistency when repeated on a group of or individuals or a population, that's this kind of, that's the definition, test, retest, or as Popham calls it, stability reliability. It means taking the same test twice and comparing results. So if you gave your midterm test on Monday and then on Thursday gave it again without anything happening in between, you could compare those results. Now, that's what Popham means by this, what the teachers need to take away from this. You wouldn't do that. Of course you wouldn't do that, but that is the definition. And there are some test makers that do that. They will give the test to the same group a few days later to see if they're getting the same results. This is the most common form. This is what people usually talk about when they talk about reliability, that you're consistently getting the same results on the same test. Of course, if you do this, and I'm not recommending you do it, no significant event can happen in between. Like I think Popham says they go watch a movie on the Civil War if they were taking a test on the Civil War, or they go and look up the answers to their questions. So we know we're not going to do that kind of testing and retesting, but it's good to know that that is the definition of test-retest reliability. This is a type that you should be familiar with. It's called alternate form reliability, and if any of you have taken the SATs or the GREs, you know that they give the tests on different dates, and typically they should give the same results. So these are different forms of the same test. So alternate form reliability simply means that there is consistency between those. So if I took it on the SATs in October, they should be the same. I should get pretty much the same results as what I would get if I took it in May. So this is, as I mentioned, it's often computed when high-stakes test is being used and given at different times throughout the year. It's also known as equivalent form or parallel form. So alternate form reliability, that's one of your vocabulary words. Consistency results between two different forms of the same test. There's also the biggest kind of reliability that you will see on, say, any large-scale test is what we call internal consistency reliability. There's a lot of technical terms for internal consistency, like split half and things like that. But I'm not going to talk about those. I just want you to know that when test makers make a test, they have statistical procedures that they use to see if the items are functioning homogeneously. So it's got to do with the items. I know when I did my doctoral dissertation, I created an assessment of teaching styles, and I had to find out if my items were functioning consistently, if they were measuring what I wanted them to measure, and I was getting consistent results. So what's great about this type of reliability is that it only requires one administration. So you can see with the big testing companies, they don't want to have taking all these tests and giving them more than once because it costs money. So it only requires one administration, and as I mentioned, you want to see if the items are functioning homogeneously. And as I mentioned here, it's only worthwhile if the assessment is evaluating a single variable like reading or math. So that's important. One of the types of reliability that's not mentioned in either, I do not believe it's mentioned in Cohen and Spencer, and I know it's not mentioned in Popham, because it technically isn't reliability per se. It has to do with the grading of a test. So it's the reliability of the grading. And many of you may encounter this. It's called inter-rater reliability, and it's the measure of which two or more raters agree on how to score a test. So I know when the ELA portion of the state assessments is given, at least the Regents, is graded by two different teachers. So those two teachers have to agree. So as you see in this picture, you have observer 1, observer 2, you compare them, and you get what we call a correlation, or and the closer to 1 that is, the better the reliability. And if those two raters don't agree, I know there's a third person that has to come in and grade the test, and then they take the best two, the two that are closest. So this is a form of reliability that you should encounter, should be familiar with, and it's used when a test is much more subjective than objective. You don't need two people to correct a selected response test, but you do need two people to correct an essay test. So that's when it would be typically used. The Cohen and Spencer talk about correlation coefficients. I think Popham might as well. What a correlation coefficient is measuring the relationship amongst scores or test items, scoring procedures, observations, or behavior ratings. And you can see that a consistent scoring would be close to a straight line, closer to a straight line that would be 1 over 1. And they call this coefficient R. You'll see that many times. And the usual standard for large-scale tests is 0.90. That is the gold standard, and usually is what is expected. You don't see too many tests that get on the market that don't have that kind of correlation coefficient. So you can see in this picture, this is a positive correlation, that as the vocabulary scores go up, IQ scores go up, so they are positively correlated. So that's a strong correlation. As you can see, they're all grouped together. You can see there are different correlations here, and two of these are what I would call strong correlations. This is a strong positive correlation in the left corner here. In the lower right corner, that's what you would call a strong negative correlation, but it's still a strong relationship. And you'll probably get a test question on this. So the answer would be E and F. They are both strong correlations. The others are not so strong. 0.7 would be stronger than these other three, but the two on the bottom are the strongest. So let's talk about what influences reliability, because this is what you need to know. When Popham says you don't need to know much about reliability, you don't need to, because you're not going to use it, you need to know what would make your test reliable. The longer your test, the more questions you have, the more reliable it is. If speediness means that students can finish it in the time you're given. If they can't finish it, then your test isn't going to be reliable. In other words, you can't make reliable and valid inferences about what those kids know. You're not going to get the same results every time. Group homogeneity, this isn't something you really need to be concerned about, but if you have the same kind of kids, you're going to get much more reliable results. So if they're all AP students, or if they're all female students, or if they're all white-collar students from good neighborhoods, that's what we mean by group homogeneity, and you're probably going to get very consistent scores that way. Item difficulty, the more difficult your test is, the less reliable it's going to be. As I said before, objectivity, if you have a selective response test, the chances it's going to be reliable are much better than one that's subjective. And of course, the test-retest interval, if you test students now and you test them on the same material 6 months from now, you're not going to get the same results. So, and also errors in the testing situation. Is it too hot? Are kids uncomfortable? Is the lighting poor? Is it cold? Those are what we call errors in the testing situation, and of course they reflect reliability. They affect reliability. Popham talks about the standard error of measurement. I think Cohen and Spencer might too. And the standard error of measurement has to do with an individual's test score. So it's the reliability of an individual's test score. It's the chance that they would get the same result if they took the test over and over again. So, and it's usually given as a plus or minus, and Popham says uses the comparison to a lot of the surveys that you see that you might see in the paper or the television, or now that we're getting close to elections, you'll see that there is this survey is correct to plus or minus 3 points, or plus or minus 5. That's what a standard error measure is. It's usually computed for every test, and what I talk to people about is that we should be using the standard error measurement when we're talking about cut scores. And the cut scores are like our Regents exams and our state exams. When a student is either a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1, I believe they should factor in the standard error measurement. If it's a +2, they should add that 2 points to the score and then see if they make the cut point. So just my take on it. And again, this is something that you should know. What are the sources of test error that affect the standard error measurement? Poorly worded questions, that's the biggest one. When you create your test, for me, one of the things that you'll struggle with is making test questions that are clear, and there's no doubt about what that question is asking. So that's one thing that causes error. Questions that are biased. We'll get into this 2 weeks from now, or 2 sessions from now, when we talk about absence of bias and how you can make sure your tests aren't biased, and different interpretations of the wording of a test. So that's it. If this were a live class, I would have you do exit cards, and I'm not going to play I have a video here from. And I'm just going to log on to it. But the teaching channel is a place where you should go often, and I get emails from the teaching channel every day with different videos, and there's a lot of great stuff in there. And this happens to be using exit cards, tiered exit cards. So, excuse me. So you should click on this and check it out. Good stuff. So that's it for reliability. I'll be back next session talking about validity, and following that, absence of bias.